but he'll make sure that we're posted, we're open going on here.
You know, if we did something really crazy, I'm sure we'd have all kinds of viewers. So it's probably a good thing that we don't have very many viewers.
Oh, now I need to figure out how to turn the audio off.
And we are live.
We'll make sure that we're posted, we're open going on here. Okay, I think we're good. I think I turned my audio off on that, so I'm good to go too. All right, we're good to go. We'll get started then. I have my brief little piece that I want to read for our statement. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the Boone County Mental Health Tax Board Advisory Committee. This meeting, the public meeting notice, the Boone County Tax Board Mental Health Advisory Committee pursuant to KRS 61.826 and OAG 20-05 will meet on Wednesday, May 19th, 2021 at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via video teleconference. This meeting format has been necessitated due to a state of emergency regarding threats to public health presented by the novel coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting may be attended by the public by viewing the video teleconference via YouTube at www.youtube.com/channel/UCG10FG8BMAX4MKJGOLJETOA. The meeting agenda will be posted in advance of the meeting, and residents may submit questions or comment regarding any item to the Human Services Director, lplyme@booncountyky.org, no later than Monday, May 17th, 2021 at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. That is this out of the way. I've received no questions at all, so we're good to go on that particular point of it. So thank you for joining us again so quickly. I know we just got to speak a little bit a month or so ago for our capital funds, and so looking forward to speaking with you. Dee, you're really taking advantage of that nice weather out there before the cicadas invade. So I'm a little jealous of that. We have review today, including just want to chat a little bit about our fiscal year 21 allocations. I know that Dylan filled you in on some of the items that we accommodated for fiscal year 21. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. I won't go into depth into that too much because we did discuss that at the capital fund, but the big thing to remember here is that with the influence of COVID-19 on services, and then also some of the responses that we allowed with the organizations for alternate billing, unit rate change, things like that, it's going to really impact some of those metrics that we look at annually, utilization rates in particular. So that tool will not be as useful to us as it is often to understand what the organization is doing and how they're serving items. So that caveat, if you need a refresher on that, I'm happy to share that with you about all those different items that we provided to agencies. Are you comfortable with that particular piece? I think we discussed it pretty heavily and going forward. Okay, and I do want to apologize too. I try to get out the links to the extra information a week in advance, and it just fell off my radar, and I apologize. So getting it out to you yesterday was very late, and I'm sure you didn't get a chance to thoroughly review all of the 990s and things like that. But if you have a question, please let us know, and we'll walk through all of that. So I apologize for not getting that particular piece out to you earlier. Well, if that's okay with you, then we'll just jump into our recommendations and do our usual list here. Let me pull up I'll pull up a screen to share what our current recommendations are from the department. And I won't leave this up the whole time, but I think it will be it'd be helpful to understand where we are at. Hold on just a moment, I apologize. So you'll see that if the bottom here, and I can kind of show you other items. Total request for this fund was a little over $1.4 million. In fiscal year 21, you allocated $1,400,000 or $4,000, excuse me. So very near a very high rate of allocation. If you accept our recommendations where they're at today, it would be a little bit lower than we were last year at $1,002,000. But I think there's some room there for interest if you want to move things along. So this is, as a reminder, this is our largest category that's funded by the mental health tax. Collectively, the other two are somewhere around 1.2 million. So this is a significant portion of payroll tax funds go to these mental health programs. And of course, this is a very broad definition of mental health. that we allow applications for. Should we start at the first organization here at CASA? Is that okay with the board, tax board? So CASA is our court-appointed special advocacy program. This organization is closely works with the Boone County Justice Center with the Family Court program. They provide volunteers to work with families, children who have been placed within who are going through family court for various reasons, perhaps child abuse or neglect, things like that. And they act as a special interested party on behalf of the children. This would be somebody in addition to your court-appointed worker, maybe your guardian ad litem, things like that. This is just a volunteer person who's going out into maybe doing a couple home visits with the child and trying to act as their best interest within the community. Our recommendation is to keep this funding flat. They have expanded into Gallatin County. So one of our unique pieces with Boone County is that our court system overlaps currently, although I think that's ending with this new census piece when the new census results coming out. Currently, our courts overlap and service Gallatin County also. So they have been asked to expand into Gallatin County, but if you read in their application, and they have done some services in Gallatin County, but in 2021, they have not because they've lost their volunteers. So I expect that they'll be doing some additional services going forward in Gallatin. And because of that, I don't know that we want to fully fund all of that work. They don't apply any units on this application for Gallatin County. And we don't necessarily want to take the burden of that cost on for Boone County if it's not for Boone County residents. So for our recommendation is to keep flat utilization. They're about on par with their utilization here. Actually, Dylan, would you mind getting me a hard copy of that utilization rate? I should have printed that up before we started talking. Thank you. Any questions about that? You want to keep going and just if you have any questions at the end, does that work okay? Okay. So this is we call this one of our bargains here. This provides for the Boone County Jail. It does crisis and counseling intervention services at the jail. So this is funding that goes, we do it 111 funding. They provide just general therapeutic crisis intervention services through a contractor at the Boone County Jail. Kind of one of the ones that we fund annually at a flat rate. It's been $21,000 for over 12 years. It's been a long time. Jumping onto Brighton Center, there are 4 programs that Brighton Center has submitted applications for. Financial services. This program, if you'll recall, is something that actually they started requesting funds from Boone County for during the financial crisis in 08 and 09, the recession. It was a lot of mortgage and mortgage foreclosure prevention that they did, and some other assistance too. So this is something that we funded heavily in the beginning, and as the need was there, and then as the economy improved, we started pulling back on that a little bit. This may be one where we want to consider doing a little bit extra funding than we have. We have a flat funding right now, but we may consider doing a little bit more. Homeward Bound Shelter is the only shelter for unaccompanied youth between ages 12 and, let's say 12, did I say 12? 17. We were just there yesterday. Dylan, do you recall if it's 12? It's 12.
Yes, it is 12. And I occasionally do they not go above 17?
They cannot do above 17 because then they're technically an adult and they're not allowed to be in the same shelter.
Yeah.
So
I must have confused that with the different thing.
Yeah, it's a tricky piece there. So the 12 to 17-year-olds, this is primarily for individuals who have for kids who have run away, or perhaps their parents are their family's experiencing homelessness and they can get into an adult shelter, but the children can't accompany. It's not a family shelter. And they have also expanded a little bit to doing some residential for the cabinet. The cabinet has asked them to apply, and so they got licensed to do some residential services. So that would be like longer term care for youth in specific settings that they would do that piece for. We've been happy with this program. They've been good partners with this. The emergency assistance, this is going to be one of those, we kind of consider that a prevention program in some ways, where it provides financial assistance into the community. So they do, besides getting that case management, this can be just cash assistance going into the community for individuals. And it's often, like I said, a prevention from homelessness, maybe with a utility assistance or rent assistance, things like that. This is one of those we anticipate being a very high needed item in the next year with the coming out of the moratoriums on evictions and folks who've been impacted negatively by the COVID-19 pandemic on their employment. Youth leadership development, these are very brief overviews, is the youth mentoring program that we asked Brighton Center to expand into Boone County schools. They work closely in Newport, and we asked them to come out to Boone County. They are in our R.A. Jones and Ackerman Middle School. They previously, prior to, they had a rough start with the pandemic. It was difficult getting the kids to log in to do something extra after they were logging in for school, and which I think we can all understand that particular piece of it. But the schools have really liked this program enough that they have allocated time during the day for the children to participate. So it's not an after school program like it is in Newport. They participate during the day. R.A. Jones has provided 3 classes. They referred kids for 3 classes. It was 6th grade, a 7th grade, and an 8th grade program in the past. And then Ackerman has 1 program that operates. We've been happy with the way the program has been operating. It's been a little bit lower this year, but again, because of the pandemic, but they got really positive results. R.A. Jones shared an email. Our Kate Arthur with Brighton Center shared an email, and I can pull that up too. I should have had it ready. I apologize. About some of the positive experiences from R.A. Jones. So just a comment on, she said, thanks so much for coming to our school and giving students an extra to look forward to this year. It's a valuable service every year, but even more so during the past year when so many other things our kids have to look forward has been taken from them. I know they enjoy coming to club. One parent told her that she offered to let her son stay home from school on a particular day, but he declined because he didn't want to miss the club. So I think, it's been a valuable piece, and that was that one was from Ackerman actually, so not R.A. Jones, but we're happy with that particular program. So these numbers, if you look at the fiscal year 22, so this is a fiscal year 21, this recommendation here, it's less than their ask. It would be flat funding. This would be at their ask. This would basically be at their ask, and the same thing here. So there would be a reduction for 2 programs because their ask is less based on the way they complete the application. A slight increase for the emergency assistance. Again, these are one of the ones that we like because it's just flat money, mostly flat money going out to the organization. There's a little bit of admin onto that in those cases. Any thoughts here about these? So I can take a sip of my iced tea. Yeah. Good to go? You want to keep going?
I'm always going to be in support of the Brighton Center stuff. They run a very tight ship, and they are fiscally responsible. And their programs, if it doesn't work, it's not going to be on there. So I feel like I think that these are good numbers. That's my 2 cents.
I could see a real need for those financial services coming in, the 2 cents of finance and the classes that they offer. Again, as potentially going through this economic whatever the economic impacts of COVID-19, as we're reemerging from some of as we know that some of the most vulnerable folks in our community are those that are being impacted most. And of course, there is a lot of assistance that's out there right now. And so hopefully that's very effective. But they're kind of the way that these organizations kind of work, they're always kind of looking at next step ahead. Like right now, this is where we're at, but what's coming down next door? What do we need to be thinking forward? So appreciate that too.
Quick question about the youth leadership development for the Brighton Center, particularly sounds like going so well, beneficial for students and parents. Beside academic success, how they define the successful from this program? do you recall or do you know much about how they define the success?
They do a DESAs on the kids. And so she was telling us that I don't think they were able to do one in the beginning of the year because of the COVID, but she said that they'll do it now. And so partially the define is giving the positive feedback from the schools. They're going to do the DESA on the children. And she said, while that won't necessarily tell you because they don't have that starting the beginning of the year, she anticipates they'll be able to bring some of those kids back next year into the program. So they had the one program in particular, and Dylan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but she said they had a lot of 7th graders in the one program that participated this year. So they anticipate they'll be able to serve them again in 8th grade next year, in addition to bringing on some 6th and 7th graders. So that's their one tool. So they use the Wyman's Teen Outreach Program, which is it's evidence-based and it's through SAMHSA. So it's a good curriculum. Does that help?
That helps, and it sounds like obviously the retention and the interest group number they probably track down. So thank you. That helps me to see how the program define the success. So that sounds like really exciting that they are able to continue.
And this might be something that we could talk to Boone County Schools about expanding if they're interested in it. I was chatting with Amanda Peters, who is at the Northern Kentucky Office of Directorial Policy, and she worked at Brighton Center previously and worked closely on some of these programs. And she said that the teen coalition, the Teen Cafe is kind of the next step that they developed. Are you familiar with it, Suki?
Yes, the Institute for Health Innovation Center has a teen cafe, science cafe that they have. I used to involve, of course, a lot of different counties and high school, particularly that. And also it has a network in our Northern Kentucky. It's not only for the student, but also the teachers.
Oh, yeah.
That we had that events as an ongoing event. In fact, around this time last year that I had a presentation to the network for the Teen Science Cafe. And I think that we have to expand that a little bit more and linking into the college campuses as a very healthy strategy to bring our own student into the college level and make it a smooth transition, and also finding their own call for the field, which field they are interested in. Mm-hmm. So yes, I am familiar with that Teen Science Cafe program through the Institute for Health Innovation Center at NKU.
Okay. So, and I know Brighton does something with it too, that it might be something that we could look into expanding if the schools are interested in additional kind of programming opportunities too.
If you need a connection, I can link between the community to the IHI cafe, science cafe program. So
yeah, please do. Thank you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I'll move down then if you're comfortable with those numbers at this point. And of course, we can always go back and change as needed. Our next organization here is Catholic Charities. This is one, as you know, all of them have been impacted by COVID. This one's been particularly challenging for them with the in-school. I know that they still are providing therapy to the schools at Boone County High School and Mary Queen. Not at Boone County High School and Mary Queen, not all high schools, I should say that. They've had billing issues. They have not billing issues. They've had personnel issues, as Dylan let you know. And so we haven't gotten a billing from them in a while, but based on past performance, I think they can do this. This is one where the parenting education has been a pretty strong program. They've got a strong parenting education program. This is one we relied on when we made the decision not to fund CareNet a few years ago, because between the Catholic Charities and the Family Nurturing Center parenting education programs, they were both more substantial programs, evidence-based, and they were both much more tied in with the court systems and much more reliant, whereas the CareNet one didn't quite seem to have as strict standards. So this has been a good one. The school-based counseling, you all remember, and for Suki's knowledge, they were the longtime funder or provider for school-based counseling services in Boone County. Their contract was upward of $120,000 to $140,000 for services in 5 different Boone County schools, up to 6. And then 3 years ago, after the tax board met to make the allocation, we received a notice from Catholic Charities saying that they did not want to do the services any longer. So they put the application in, the tax board reviewed it and approved it. They let us know in May that they didn't want to do the services the following year due to personnel issues, and they would only do it in 2 schools, Mary Queen of Heaven and Boone County High School. So that kind of left us scrambling, and we went and talked to the schools and found New Day Ranch as an option for an alternate kind of service. So as that, I think that the 40,000, keeping them flat, is probably where we would be. I feel like it wasn't a good partnership for them to pull out that way. They had been in R.A. Jones since the early 90s. It was R.A. Jones it was Ackerman maybe, that they had been in that school since the early 90s providing services. And then they decided to pull out because they didn't want to have to try to find personnel to cover the programming. So I was very disappointed to hear that. So our recommendation right now is to keep it flat. It's hard to tell how their utilization is going with parenting education because we haven't had the billing. So without knowing that, I would recommend keeping it at 10,000. As a reminder, our programs, any organization, any program that exceeds 50% of the allocation by December 31st can request up to 20% of the original allocation. So they could get an extra couple, $100 in, extra couple $1,000 in this by the end of the mid-year anyway. So I think they're covered with that parenting education piece. It's safer maybe to keep it flat at that point. That makes sense? Okay, so thank you, Suki. Our next one is our friend, our Children's Home in Northern Kentucky programming. He did finally reach out to me. Mr. Rick Worth reached out on the 4th of May. I have not responded. It's been a busy couple of weeks with illness and other things going on, but to ask as to why they were not funded for the capital fund. So I will be sharing that information with him. I did not intend to not respond at this point, but it's just timing wise, it hasn't worked out. So the gist here is that this is basically the same thing that we discussed under the capital campaigns. I'll have Dylan, if you don't mind, I'll stop sharing my screen real quick. Would you mind sharing your screen with the information that you pulled together? He pulled together a line chart here, a bar chart.
Yep, give me 1 second. All right, I clicked away from it because of printing out something earlier.
Thank you.
Here it is.
So this is going to show our the executive compensation from the organizations, applicant organizations. I will point out that on our left-hand side here is,
Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure
No, you're fine. The New Day Ranch is all the way on the left-hand side here. It's a very small program, small organization. You can kind of see as they go along, but disproportionately listed here is Children's Home of Northern Kentucky. I think, especially when you look at their budget, and we discussed this based upon their budget before, it exceeds even the YMCA of Greater Cincinnati, which is a much larger organization, both in staffing and income, revenue, and expenses. It's just, I just can't quite pull the two together. The next highest that we also usually have a lot of concern about, we had in the past had some concern about, was people working cooperatively, but it does appear we have some organizations that are slowly kind of getting closer to that that agency number. I think that the concerns are still there. The residential treatment programming, it might still be fine programming that they're offering. The rates really are about the same, but we feel that they really haven't addressed the issues that we've had with them in the past regarding that executive compensation. And I think it is a fair measure to review in consideration of the IRS that looks at executive compensation when incorporating or licensing nonprofits. No, licensing is not the correct word. Issuing nonprofit certificates. Sorry?
I was going to say granting them nonprofit status.
Yes, that's it. So those two pieces together. the piece with the residential treatment for youth, when you look at their numbers, we really would be a very small portion of what they'd be providing. Of the 161 total unduplicated clients, 15 of them they're projecting from Boone County. They just don't get, collectively, Boone, Kenton, and Campbell together are only about half of the total of the other counties. They don't get a lot of Northern Kentucky clients here. If you're talking about the counseling crisis intervention, this is a program that their price has definitely come down, which is helpful as they're billing Medicaid, getting some of those funds in. It's not really, if you were to fund this one, I'd want to have some discussion about how they're doing it, because they're grouping individual, group, and family therapies all together. We don't like to have those multiple kind of systems listed because the units get a little goofy, and the costs are a little different. So yeah, that's where I think that our recommendation is not to fund this organization at this time. To my knowledge, Kenton and Campbell are not also, but I will leave that up to you all.
I don't know that that I need to go rehash and hash this. I feel like this has been a story that I've actually, told to other people, because as you all may remember, one of their board members who happened to be a client at the time called me up and asked the question as to why we chose not to fund it. This is a great chart. I think if you have to send that to the fiscal court along with our recommendation to show, we are trying to be good stewards of the tax dollars that are allocated to the county. And so therefore, this is the deal. The big one that catches me is the YMCA, because that dude's running like a whole lot. And considering the difference in the amount of responsibility under one person's watch versus another person's, that's crazy. So I think that's a great chart. Great job, Dylan. It speaks for itself.
I agree. I continue to hope that you're going to have, new answers or better, but there just never is.
There's not. There just isn't. I think they even say that on their kind of their spiel is listed here on the application, that they feel it's completely justified because the CEO is a CDO also, and that that makes total sense to them. And I just don't think it does in comparison. And yeah, at some point we're gonna have to maybe reconsider some of the concerns we have regarding the renovations at the main facility and the cost associated with that. But I don't know that we're there yet. And I don't, a few years out, 4 or 5 years out from that isn't still that long with the investment that was made onto that property. So, well, if you're okay with that, we'll move forward. And again, we can always come back to any of this, but all right, let me go ahead and put this back up. Thank you, Dylan.
Welcome.
So our next one is the Other Children's Home, Diocesan Catholic Children's Home, or DCCH Center for Children and Families. Both just roll off the tongue. So they do not ask for funding from us for school-based counseling. I probably should have just hidden that line. This is a chart we share with Kenton and Campbell. Actually, Campbell kind of inputs all the data to begin with, and then we tweak it as we need. So that's why that's listed there. This is their residential treatment, and we're still sort of in negotiations with them regarding their unit costs. For the past couple of years, this past year, for fiscal year 21, we asked them to resubmit it because they accounted in their program $400,000 worth of program development costs, so fundraising costs, but they listed no fundraising revenue on the program. So it's like, how can you list almost $500,000 in program development fundraising costs, but not tell us you're getting any money from it? So they resubmitted the application, which I think you all received. We still had some questions because once they did that, they changed some numbers under their other expenses, and in a conversation with them, we think those are not quite right either. So I think that number will come down a little bit more. this is another one for as good of work as we do. So they're unique in that they provide residential treatment services for 6 to 14-year-olds for both boys and girls. So they have a co-ed facility. We have had some billing issues with them. We had the billing issues last year when we met, and that were kind of ongoing, and they continued into this year again, where we had to have a conversation with their management team to just say, we can't be the ones that are constantly policing to make sure things are right. So we have some concerns about that, and we're going to continue to monitor that. We haven't, we got to the point where we put a clause within our contracts that if we have to correct an invoice too many times, that we can bill for our time. And we gave them a warning. So if it happens again, we may bill for our time to do the corrections on it, just because it's a lot of time to do, and it's the same error. So when it's the same type of an error, that's when it gets to be concerning about the bookkeeping. I think the service is good. I worry about a little bit of that. As far as the behind the scenes, the checking piece, they did wind up going through their funds. This is one of the residential treatment is one where it just depends on who they get. Each of the programs, Holly Hill, DCCH, Brighton Center, it just depends on how the kids come through as to what their utilization is going to be. So this utilization rate on the new application is closer. It's still a little bit higher than what they're currently doing. And they did run out of funds this year. Our recommendation is to keep it flat, partially because we have some concerns about that billing. But you'll see that they did get an increase this year of $8,000. So they pulled down all of that funding. So there's still some flexibility there. Again, I said our recommendation is to keep it flat at this time. Okay, I'll run down. I'll unless you stop me, I'll keep going. Pull these up a little bit further. So Emergency Shelter of Northern Kentucky. These are our friends in Covington. They're getting ready to move into their new facility, hopefully this fall. They've been working, the construction is progressing. So I want to clarify some of the names on here. Their emergency shelter is what we think of as their typical winter shelter. The residential housing is really what they're calling their summer recovery program, where they do a little bit more intensive intensive support for select men, about 12 men at a time over the summer, to getting them some a little bit more case management, a little bit more of a steady bed, rather than that just night by night shelter that happens with the emergency shelter. And then the Homeless Street Outreach is really their shower and laundry program. Our recommendation is to do the request at $5,000, and it's a flat request, a flat funding for the emergency shelter portion. The Homeless Street Outreach is that shelter and laundry. You all approved funds for the facility at Florence Christian to increase that program. So I would not recommend funding for that program at this time. And then again, for that summer housing piece, that's one that we don't necessarily always recommend. We have not funded that one in the past. I think it's a little challenging to, it can be a little more challenging with that program. We could certainly consider it if you're interested. I think we've got some good things actually happening here in Boone County that I'd rather start looking at how we're going to invest our money in that than doing it in Covington. I don't think we should pull the funding for the emergency shelter the night by night. I think they do that very well. And I think they'll be better served to do that when they're in their new building. But that's our current recommendation. Okay, I'll move along. Again, if you have any questions about this or any concerns, this is really up to you all to do. So our next program is Family Nurturing Center. I'm sorry, Faith Community Pharmacy. Jump down one. So Faith Community Pharmacy applies for funding both for our under 60, they call that for mental health, and then for anybody over 60 in the aging category. They have seen an increase in their use over the past year, just due again to the economic impacts of COVID-19. They've had some changes. We're in conversation with them about how they calculate and work through some systems. we're overall happy with the service. I think we're waiting to see how they work. They're currently located in Boone County, but they've had some conversation about moving to Newport or Covington to be closer to the customers, which kind of rubs you the wrong way when you're the Boone County representative and you're funding them to serve Boone County residents. But I guess we'll see how that works out. I think he's done some good work, but he's really has some concerns about how he really wants to try to use our funding sometimes to help fund the program in the rural counties, which is just not what our interest is. That's not, you serve the rural counties surely, but not at the cost of the Boone County taxpayer. So the allocation is, our recommendation is to keep it flat at 17, which is what their request is. Just jumping along. So Family Nurturing Center, this is one where we are recommending an increase here. So they have the 4 programs listed here. Quickly, the child abuse treatment services is when they're doing services for children, sometimes, a lot of times individually. They do some of that in groups at schools. They've been a good resource. Again, going back to R.A. Jones, 2 years ago, you'll remember they had an influx of families from, oh gosh, it's a country, oh my gosh, it's my mind, isn't it? A country in Africa that has the highest per capita incidence of rape. Like it's a lot of trauma. It's a very, there's where they had a very, it's a highly traumatic kind of experience, but they had an influx of immigrants from that particular country due to, I think, families coming to work in Hebron and Amazon and things like that. And so they were like in September, they had like 100, 150 kids all enroll from this one region.
Was it Uganda? It's not Uganda, is it?
Not Uganda. It'll come to me tonight at 2 a.m. So I'll text you.
That's right. It's
Sudan?
exactly when it would come to you.
No, not
I know what
Sudan.
you're talking about, but
I'll find it. I will email it to you all. It's so really kind of in a fantastic way. They brought Family Nurturing Center went out and started facilitating some conversations. So that really, I think the neat thing is the school system really wrapped around this group that came in, and they hosted a meeting and they talked about ways that they could better communicate, because it was really kind of even for the size of the school, a good impact. A large number of folks were coming in, and so they responded in a way and started providing services, and that's exactly what they did there. No, it's not Somalia. It's not Somalia.
Well, I found a news article talking about refugees at R.A. Jones from Somalia, so that was my.
There are a lot of Somalis that
that's
come.
what I was trying to think, Dylan, when I said Sudan was Somalia.
This feels like Jeopardy.
My son, he's trying to get on Jeopardy. He watches it every night.
Congolese.
Congolese.
Okay.
Yes, they were Congolese. So, but they provide us groups at the schools and things like that. They were nice response to that. You'll recall that we increased them a few years ago when we saw that they had a wait list for kids, and every year they exceed their allocation. They make transfers. They get a mid-year increase. So our recommendation was to increase it at least slightly. This would be a 20,000 increase if you go with the 70. That's a pretty significant increase in funding. It's not the full ask, but I think it still is a significant investment. We can certainly go higher if you'd like. Parenting education, again, this is another quality program. The one that I've kind of always been concerned with them, with family, is I feel like we're one of the larger funders between the 3 counties, but yet we're not always getting, they list our numbers as being higher, but when I look at our monitoring guides, it hasn't always been higher than the other 2 counties. So I kind of always wonder what are the barriers to getting Boone County residents into the parenting education programs. The Kids on the Block program is the child abuse awareness puppet program for schools. They also do a bullying one. And that suffered a little bit because of obviously with COVID, but they've done some virtual things, but it's been very well received within the schools. I think you probably have seen them come through in the past. And then Stewards of Children, this is the one that is, it's a training for adults to be aware of potential abuse situations as a prevention method. So kind of educating adults about how to prevent mostly child sexual abuse. And so they've partnered with Darkness to Light to expand that within the community. And they do trainings at like workplaces and in the community to make families aware of risks for child abuse. This is one that I think is a small allocation is fine. I don't know that I'd want to go a full 10,000. I wouldn't recommend necessarily full 10,000 for that. That's that particular program. Thoughts about that? Any concerns? You too high, too low? This is kind of one of our big changes.
I'm like with Family Nurturing Center. I'm like Carolyn with Brighton. I always think, you know, they have really good programs. And really, I feel like they really do a good job of implementing their programs. And they're always a lot of school-based, which I think is a good thing.
And Suki, going back to what you were asking before, so with these organizations, when we do monitorings of them, we look at their outcomes. And for the organizations, it's always easiest when the organizations are funded by United Way because they always have really strong outcomes built into their programming. And Family Nurturing Center always scores really highly in those outcomes. Same thing with Brighton Center, you know, really highly, a high number of outcomes in those programs. And you have access to those on that shared link drive that I sent to you. All that information will be on there. All right, we'll move down. Dylan suggested 75,000 for child abuse treatment services, and I felt that was a little too high with a 50% increase, but certainly consider it if you're interested. So Holly Hill, you'll recall they missed our application 2 years ago. They've had a changeover in staff. We've had lots of discussion with them throughout the year about how they bill services, and they've had a lot of turnover. I'll say they've had a lot of turnover in their executive director position ever since their longtime executive director, Connie Wong, retired maybe 6 years ago. So residential treatment, this is a facility in Campbell County, Southern Campbell County in California, that provides residential treatment just for girls. So it's all female out there. 11 to 18 is their age. Again, a good program, a sound program. They do well. One that often just fluctuates based upon if they get a Boone County resident or they don't. But they do good programming at that facility. We've said this before, it's one of those nice facilities. It's right on the hill overlooking the Ohio River. It's a beautiful facility, like kind of out in a rather secluded part of the area, but with great views, just like DCCH and what's his face? Campbell County, Campbell Boys Lodge had too. Yeah, all of them had that. The supervised visitation program, we've had a lot of discussion with them for this year. Confusion about how they were billing, who they were billing for. Do they bill for the child? Do they bill for the custodial parent? Do they bill for the visiting parent? They had been billing for the visiting parent. They made the decision that they wanted to bill for the child instead. We really allow a lot of leeway with how these organizations design that kind of a program. We consider them to be the experts in it. So we've had a lot of discussion about that. So these numbers are I think still a little skewed because they don't necessarily have all the historical data for how many kids and how many units they're going to be providing. So this is based upon a child. But for instance, if a parent is visiting and has 2 kids, they'll split that by the 2 kids. So if it's an hour-long visit, you get half a unit visit for this child and half a unit visit for this child is how they'll do that.
And excuse me, but the fee goes to pay for somebody to be supervising the visit.
Yeah, so these are for
Gotcha.
families, children who've been removed from the care of a parent and have been ordered that they cannot see the child without having a supervisor there. It's not, Family Nurturing Center does the same type of a program in Ohio, but the state of Ohio pays for it. And so they actually provide some kind of clinical services too. They're not really doing that in this instance. They're supervising the visit and then they're providing reports back to the court system potentially, but not necessarily giving parenting education to the parent as they go through it. There was something must have happened. Their former director who just left, I know well from, she used to work at Brighton Center and then she was at Children's Home in Northern Kentucky. I know her very well. Don't fully understand why she left. That it appears in a conversation I've had with them that they lost their Victims of Crime Act funding last year, perhaps in association with that executive director, but they've been encouraged to apply for it again. So concerning there. I think they have to get some of their ducks in a row at Holly Hill. Again, it's one of those instances, I don't know that the frontline service is a problem, but quality programming, but you got to wonder too about the structure of the organization and that piece of it. I think they're trying, but they have some work to do.
I can share regarding the utilization rate, since they have since submitted additional billings. So as of March 31st, they had fully billed out their residential treatment program and we're at 51% utilization for the supervised visitation.
Thank you. And again, residential, go ahead.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Holly Hill. So if you guys think it seems suitable, then I'm okay with it. I mean, it's certainly not a huge number in our overall budget. So, you hate to cut them off because they're going through something, sounds like, on a higher level, but probably the care that the girls are getting is appropriate. So, hopefully they'll get through it.
And if you look at that, based on the current utilization, we could do up to another 9,000 would be like a full funding, but not 44,000. I think that would, for residential treatment, that would be just more than what they would need. And again, going back to it, all of this is reimbursement based. So if we do allocate it more and they don't use it, that's fine. But it's probably something where we need to go out and do a full monitoring of that organization in the fall. We try to do it every 2 years, but because of the issues going on, we may need to go out and do it more often. I'm not so concerned that I wouldn't recommend not funding them at all. I mean, we're watching, but not necessarily not funding it. Maybe not increasing the funding, but we're doing close.
I mean, I know we used to get when we did have a few of their kids that would be at school, their caseworkers were always just super. That would come and visit them. I mean, it's only a handful of people that I can speak for, over the years, but they were always super to work with, and just, the kids really always seemed to really enjoy their time with them.
That's really good to know.
So, like I said, you're looking at a small percentage, but it's, that's what I can add.
Yeah. Okay, we'll pop down then. Legal Aid of the Bluegrass. This is a program that we recommended funding for and that you all allocated funding for 2 years ago. It just didn't go well. Legal Aid gets funding for our aging or over 60 category. They do legal assistance for seniors, for those who are aging, but the street outreach program, they just had a really hard time connecting in the community, even after several reminders that we fund Welcome Houses outreach team. They connected with a person, a very small group who I don't think is always the best organized group to work with. And then we wound up getting, so they didn't bill really anything throughout the year. And then we got a lump sum billing in June of the fiscal year because they worked on a couple getting a car that was impounded out, but they could never actually get it out because the fees had accumulated too much. And so it just felt like we were throwing money down a drain that didn't accomplish anything for the client. So the intention seemed good. The challenges are that I think a lot of the legal challenges around some of our homeless, unsheltered individuals are around evictions, and you can't necessarily always do a whole lot with that yet. So our recommendation is, again, to not fund them this year. Just as we have not funded them in fiscal year 21. My recommendation is to not in 22. Just a struggle to get it out. But sometimes I'm okay with that. Sometimes if we're helping to pilot a program and then learning that it's just not working well, it's okay to walk away from it. Do you all need a break? Are we doing okay? Okay, power through. So I'll scroll down a little bit here. Okay, Life Learning Center, it's up top here. This is the first time that they've sought funding from the counties, and they've done I joke a hard court press among the 3 counties to try to get some assistance. Are you all familiar at all with Life Learning Center?
I know Alicia Webb Edgington, who runs it, and I think it's got a connection to Bill Butler, but I don't actually know what they do.
That's you're right. So both of those things are correct. So Bill Butler started this organization, and it's housed the Stewart Ironworks building in Covington. You might remember there was a lot of conversation about that when they were renovating that facility, and thought, what could it become? At one point, they thought maybe they'd have a floor that would be all open for the emergency shelter in Northern Kentucky, and they would use that for that, but that never worked out. And it's changed a little bit in time. So to my understanding, I think a lot of their long-term funding did come from the Butler Foundation for this, and they've grown. I get the sense that they're looking to get some diverse investments coming in to help support it. And they have made a lot of efforts under Alicia Webb Edgington to expand the programming and expand their network. The program that they're asking for, I'll tell you, they're doing 2 things that, as best I can see it. Something called MRRT, which is Multidisciplinary Recovery Reentry Team. So that's not what they're asking for funding for necessarily. That particular work that they're doing, they're facilitating some treatment providers and some of our Lewis Kelly, who's our Commonwealth attorney, has started to work with this. They've piloted this for what they call their rocket docket. So when they got somebody who's coming in and not necessarily before they plead, they can do this almost as a diversion, getting into service and treatment rather than going to the jail. So the idea is, rather than sitting in jail for a charge, can they get them into treatment? And so they have pulled together North Key, Transitions, Life Learning Center, some other folks to kind of be that resource. So I think there's an opportunity there, and I hope that it continues to grow and educate, and we can filter folks through. What the current program is working primarily with folks as they re-enter from the jail system. They have a very strong relationship with Kenton County, somewhat with Boone, and not as much with Campbell. But they use a lot of volunteers to help do just different life skills and things like that. They call the program Foundations for Life, right? Am I calling it the right thing? Do I have it on here? Foundations for Better Life.
Yes.
And I'm going to read from my notes as best I know. So it's an aftercare. They're not really a treatment provider, but they help to coordinate some treatment options. They will it's a whole curriculum. And so this, Suki, may be up your alley a little bit more, that you understand a little bit some of this. It's a cognitive curriculum, and it has 5 domains: physical, relationships, emotional, financial, and spiritual, that they work through. So it's a 12-week program. They meet and for a total of 126 hours, and they kind of start them on a cohort on a running basis, but they meet for about 3.5 hours, 3 days a week. And it takes 3 weeks to get through like the self-identification piece, where they talk about psychological principles and understanding change, setting values. So kind of these life skills, building some of these life skills, and some other, not wraparound services, but support services for the individual, smart goal planning, things like that. The second 3-week section, then they talk about how to take a test and doing applications, job skill interviews, skill sets, assessments for jobs. They do that particular piece. And then they work into that other 5 domain piece, really talking about, the importance of exercise and moving your body and understanding relationships and things. So they had volunteer faculty. In 2020, they had 250 clients. In 2021, they anticipate they'll have 400 clients total. They were on the roll for that. They do support meetings. So they have medical assistant or medical assistant, medication assisted therapy recovery, smart recovery. They have a whole sessions of services. They started offering some Saturday hours and activities, kind of social events for individuals. The idea, it seems to me that this is a hole within our community. I'm a little concerned about capacity. I think that they're doing well with where they're at, but I worry that they are trying to maybe grow too fast. I think we've seen that a little bit with some of our capital funds, with some of the organizations we funded, that maybe their capacity in some of these organizations hasn't been at what they thought they would be at. So, and the other concern that I had is that I felt like their costs kind of accelerated really highly dramatically between what they did in fiscal year 20 and then what they're saying they're going to do in fiscal year 22. They kind of cited that they were working with they had hired a couple of an attorney to work with folks and things like that. But it still seemed like a high. So if you look at their application, their unit cost, this fiscal year might have been just $2, whereas next year it would have been, the next year it's $6.07. So, I think that their costs the program expenses went from being in fiscal year 20, $978,000, dropped a little in 21 to 861, but in fiscal year 22, it's going to go up to 1.3, almost 1.4 million. So it's kind of a big increase there. The thought is that it's a new program. I do think that there's a need for it in the community. I think it's going to be most successful if we can get them tied into the Boone County Jail. That seems to be how they've had a lot of success in Kenton County, is that they've got a strong connection with the Kenton County Jail. A little bit of logistics issues potentially because their facilities are located in Covington, and driving anywhere in Northern Kentucky these days is awful. So I think there's some logistics issues there. I like the idea of the program. Our current recommendation is to do a smaller investment, not the full $60,000 they're requesting, a $20,000 recommendation. That is what Campbell County has done. They've made an allocation of $20,000. And so I feel like that's kind of a comparable, like, starting investment into the community, into that program. Does that help? I had to read from my notes.
Yeah, it sounds like a great program. So let me just make sure I understand. So basically, this would be people who are, this particular program are people who are done with jail, their jail sentence, and they're trying to reemerge into society, but obviously need some support, some help, whatever, to prevent them from becoming repeat offenders, essentially, so that they can hopefully get their life turned around in a more positive way. Yeah, that's great.
I don't know of any other groups that are working this intensely on this large of a scale with that population. And I think it is a critical need to help reduce some of that recidivism. Mm-hmm. They have, I think she said, 98% of their clients have a substance use disorder, and they were in there for some substance use disorder. So when you talk about the support that they need to kind of avoid relapse, having those supports is really important. So when you look at that spectrum of support that you can do, this is a critical piece that hasn't really been necessarily fully, like I said, they're expanding. So I think they'll expand more into Boone with that service.
I think it's great. If anybody knows Alicia, she started off as a police officer. So even though she was, and she is as feisty as it comes. So her daughter and my daughter went to high school together. And I always sat there and thought, if anybody's going to get anything done, it's going to be Alicia Webb Edgington. And then, of course, she was a state representative and then ran for Congress and stuff. She's pretty amazing. So I'm sure that it's a well-run program.
Yeah, I would like to support the Life Learning Center program that Alicia and NKADD and NKU, we used to have a very open conversation about the program, including reentry program. And what I know as of today, the Life Learning Center is expanding a lot of different programs and very strong. And with Alicia's leadership in there, and quite a bit of very impressive experience and expertise that Alicia bring into that center. It was very pretty impressive on that part. So, and I know that the reentry program as a community, that's overall lacking. So anything, that piece that we can bridge some gap through this funding, I would love to support in that proposal.
What do you, Suki, what do you think about, because they have expanded, do you have any concerns about that capacity issue?
It's a big vision for having those programs, but also I think you made a great critical point, how to carry out. I don't know the capacity, including the people who are going to lead the program and how many people, what are the ratio between. But I think that this proposal indicating individual year, probably they are expecting to serve about 550. Is that right? Like a program description, continued page section that I'm reading, anticipate seeing serving an additional 550 individuals a year. They recovery center sees about 1,100 patients annually, and with a 550 additional, and I think that that's a pretty large ratio. And if so, then provider versus recipients, what's the ratio in between? When we're looking at some effectiveness of the service delivery and access to the care, and bring some service into that side. Yes, vision is great, but how we are going to carry out? That might be a good way to check with that Alicia. She might have a pretty good plan. Once got funded, probably, if I were her, I do have a plan how to utilize this funding to be more effective and to that. So I'm sure that my answer to your question is not satisfiable, but in my view, it's a pretty large number that they are intend to serve on that. But the big question is, with the pretty confidence that they might have a pretty good solid plan A and B, how to do that. But I cannot speak for their program at this moment. That might be we needed to make sure that that they have their plan.
That's a good point, and they seem to think so. And I appreciate your feedback there. It really is helpful, and it's an excellent point. When I look at what they listed as the number of units that they provided in fiscal year 20, they say they provided just shy of 28,000 units. And then in fiscal year 22, they're going to provide almost 50,000. So it's almost a 100% increase in the number of units in 2 years, which that would be kind of a pretty big growth. They have hired some new people, and they do a lot of it by volunteer. But the piece was starting at, if we started a little bit lower, around 20, it's easier to increase in the future. It's always harder to make a cut to somebody. It's to an organization. It's always. It weighs on you a little bit more when you have to cut an organization.
That's what I was gonna say. This will be a really great organization, you know, if we have mid-year funds to give out, if they've done a great job at that point, you know, to give them more money and, you know, kind of support their endeavors if they're really gonna follow through with what they are trying.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I think you'll make them happy with this. I hope so. So that's a fun job to get to do. So Mental Health America is they're one of our smaller organizations. They are the peer support services, and their payee services. So their payee services, they've asked for a decrease this year. Again, these are one of those prevention kind of services. Welcome House has a similarly funded program. Mental Health America is dealing with probably more severe mental health clients than Welcome House is, but these are the services provided, kind of financial services to keep folks money so they can help to keep them housed and safe and on their budgets. So we help to offset the costs of doing that by paying these fees into it. The clients pay a small fee into it also. So they've asked for reduction. You'll see that we had funded 11,000. Of course, they did transfer funds out into their their peer support program, and then they asked for slightly less. So the recommendation here is 7,000. They split out last year for the first time after monitoring. I think they thought it would be easier to do this as an individual versus group peer support programming. And so this was the first year that we had actually funded those separately. You'll see over here, again, they transferred funds out of the group into the individual. And because this number is so low at just 1,200, our current recommendation is not to fund the group and just fund the 10,000 here. This would still be a collective going into the organization of 17,000. So it's not an overall budget cut to them. It's just, allocating them in one place rather than doing an extra program here. It's up to you all if you prefer to keep it and keep some funding there. The disadvantage of not having it funded is that they can't transfer any of the funds to it if it does become successful, but it just seems like such a small program that sometimes it's easier to do something smaller like that. We're happy with the programming, the peer support. And Mental Health America has become they're a lead peer support program. And peer support, for your knowledge, are individuals who have experienced either mental health or substance use or both issues within their lives, and they've entered recovery, and now they're being employed to help work with individuals who are currently going through those addiction issues or potentially mental health illness. So they're individuals who have lived experience, who have been trained, and then are able to work with individuals in the community who are also going through that particular piece of it. Almost like you think of AA sponsors kind of a thing. This is almost a formalized paid version of that, working through that piece of it. And that might be an oversimplification of it, but if you think of it that way. Been very happy with the program. It's well received within the community. So we're recommending the 17,000. Okay. Mentoring Plus. This is the same spiel that I kind of given you the last few years. We've really tried to, we had lots of conversations with them. This is a mentoring program for youth. We asked them to come to Boone County, to expand to Boone County, and we would fund the program just as we did with YLD. We said, this is an area that looks like it's under served. Come to Boone County and we'll fund you. And they examined the options and decided it wasn't worth. They weren't able to do it. It wasn't, I don't know. They made a decision not to do it. And so they continue to submit applications to provide the services at their Newport location. I find it very difficult for a child who is, and they really do serve very vulnerable kids. But they're in Newport. I don't fully understand how somebody who's extremely vulnerable and maybe has an unstable home life is going to transport themselves to Newport once or twice a week to get mentoring services at this facility. So the recommendation is still not to fund it. I think if they would ever come to Boone, we'd be much more inclined to look at that, but it's just not, I don't think it's a great model for our kids for this particular group to do. This is one that Campbell does fund, but like Newport, like I said, they're very closely tied with Newport schools. There. Yeah, so in general, Boone County funds much higher than Campbell County. We just have a lot of funding and we tend to have more clients. But for your own knowledge, Mentoring Plus gets $20,000 from Campbell County, which is a pretty high allocation from Campbell County. Any questions about that? Readjust.
Is Mentoring Plus program located in different places? I was thinking just one. No,
it's just one. It's just there on York. Is it York on York Street? It's just that one location in Newport.
Just a little bit of a history that has some because my own experience with that organizations that we used to actually through the Merson project through the NKU, we fund them for that mentoring program, and we acknowledge for their financial support for the program running. That was about what 3 years ago already that I had that connection previously. So at the time that I acknowledged with my students the mentoring program that they proposed to our class, and eventually we were able to fund that program. So that's a little bit of a background on that. It's not so new to me. It's a pretty pretty well-known program, and so that's kind of a little bit of my it can be a bias a little bit on that part, but I do know that they do need a lot of mentoring, financial support for the children that they serve them. That was my impression to that. So how often they apply for this funding a couple of years now?
Yeah, they've applied for, how long has it been in existence? It's been several years.
Several years.
Several years since we had the conversation. I met with Chris Sanders and
Mhm.
not Amy, it was another woman that was there at the time, and
Yeah.
you know, kind of said, took a look at the program and how it was operating, and said,
Mhm.
I think if you come to Boone County, if you can offer this program at Boone County Schools, you can talk to Andy Rootman, see if there's a place that you can operate at the Boone County High School or something like that. It'd be something we'd be interested in pursuing. And they seemed as if they were interested in doing that, but then ultimately when they applied, they just said, no, we'll serve them at our Newport location. And the way that it's structured, I don't know if you remember this, Suki, the children are there for 1 to 2 days a week in the evening. And
Yes.
yeah, they have to transporting from, you know, Boone County, from potentially Florence or Union or, you know, Walton even, to Newport. If you don't have solid transportation, I just don't see that being a successful program. They do have a couple of clients. They'll have a couple of clients every year, but it's not much. So if you're interested in doing it, and if you have a connection with them still, if you want to, you can reach out and see if they'd be interested in coming to Boone again. But it's up to it. I'm happy to do whatever you'd like. Or if you want to try funding them, we can certainly consider that too. I mean, the rates are low. They're getting Medicaid funding now, it looks like, too. So the Medicaid expansion, the ability for folks to bill Medicaid, I think, has been a huge boon for a lot of our organizations. Do you want to leave it at this now? We can come back to it if you want to put the different thing down. Does that work, or you think so?
Yeah, I do be glad to hear from our committee's point of view on this part. For me, that evening program, and also as a community as a whole, what is the effectiveness of the funding? And maybe if we are not able to fund, maybe at least we could suggest about some little less transportation barrier in there, so that little bit more feasible as a funder. So might be beneficial for them to reconsider if they wanted to apply for in the future. I think that will benefit them rather than keep on applying for it and not knowing what is wrong here. Since we're pointing out how that will be feasible to be successful in that program without having sufficient transportation plan, and also acknowledging that is a pretty barrier to be successful in that program. So I think that if I put myself in that agency, I'd like to know what can be improved to be able to fund for that program if we are not ready to fund them to be successful. Once we fund, we want to be very successful in that program for sure. So that's my viewpoint on that part. But I do know that they serve an evening program and also the very vulnerable families a lot of conflicts within the family and also the children behavior, as far as I understand, and that was my impression a few years ago. Already it's been a while, but yeah, I will respect your overall thoughts on this part, but at least I think that they probably will appreciate that transportation as one of the key that we'd like to hear a little bit more about how to overcome that barrier to be fully functioning in this mentoring plus program for children and their family.
Yes, great point. And I mean, of course, if this is your recommendation, so, and if you don't particularly think that is an issue, we can certainly discuss that too, because I'm trying to look up if I have easily accessible some of my conversations with him. And Dana was very kind and reorganized our shared drive files, but then I was having a hard time finding the past applications. Give me just a second and I'll see if I can pull anything up here about it, if I kept my notes here.
Okay.
I can't find it easily. It's certainly something that if you are interested in trying, we could do.
What have we done in the past for them? Nothing.
Yeah, no, we haven't funded them in the past because of that. They were unable to come to Boone.
Right.
We hadn't pursued it. So they have not been funded historically from Boone County. They've been funded, I believe, definitely from Campbell, and I believe also from Kenton.
And you had a conversation trying to get him to maybe expand his thought process to come to Boone a little better. And
yeah, we met. Yeah, we met a couple times. I introduced him to Kathy Rootman, who works for Boone County Schools, and suggested, this was about the same time that we had YLD come on. So we had been involved with some planning actually through Brighton Center for Opportunity Youth. And so kind of looking at, and all the services that the county funds, the mentoring piece seemed to be lacking. So the two programs that were available were Mentoring Plus and YLD, which is a, not fully mentoring, but it sort of fits into that world. We had, YLD was happy to conform, and they did, they made the connections. I mean, it's a different agency too. Brighton Center is much, much larger than Mentoring Plus. So they have some built-in capacities, I think, to do things. Mentoring Plus is a pretty small organization. They're at one point at the time, I think they had like 4 part-time employees. They were not a large organization. I know that Campbell County is, I think, very happy with the product that they have. It's just the implementation of it not being in Boone County when your target is primarily kids who don't drive and who are particularly vulnerable. It just didn't seem to align with, it make a whole lot of sense to fund that if they weren't going to be in the.
Let me ask you this, Laura. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Do you think if we would give them money just to see that would change their mind or you think it's just would be a waste?
So they
you know what I'm saying? I mean, if we would say this is a good faith for you to see if you're actually, can open it up to some more Boone County people. And then if they don't by next year, then obviously we have our answer. Or do you think that would just be a waste?
By comparison, in fiscal year 19, Kenton County allocated $5,000. So this really is a very strong Campbell County program. They do not have as much Boone County and Kenton County. a waste. It would not, I don't know that it would convince them to come to Boone County to allocate funds to them. I think they are, again, it's a small organization. You look at their budgets, a couple $100,000. It's not a big organization. Capacity wise, and to their credit, perhaps they're saying capacity wise, we just don't have the ability to run simultaneous programs in 2 different counties. But because of our,
I think that's the answer then, you know, or at least that's the way I feel.
but because of our design, they're not going to use any of our funds unless there's a Boone County kid there. So if we decide to put some funding toward it, it's not going to be something that they, that we're not spending. The worst thing that would happen is it stays in our account and they don't ever use it all year long. So there's not a huge loss there. It's $5 per hour per child. I mean, they've had 5 or 6 kids. They said they're going to get 12 kids in Boone County next year. I think that's unlikely. I live in Campbell County. Driving from Boone County to Campbell County and vice versa is awful right now.
Yeah.
That might be my own prejudice. The bridge has really screwed everything up. Yeah, it could be my own prejudice.
Just leaving it at 0 for now then.
I agree.
Okay. And Suki, if you have any, we could certainly have a conversation with them too. If we can leave it at 0 for now and then have a conversation later. And then if you have a connection with them too, I'm happy to have that conversation. The money is out there. So.
Of course, this is a state tax and the tax dollar, and it's a very serious decision to make it. That's my view on that part, but also ultimately our group, our support what's the best to utilizing this funding to the organization. But also certainly we want to encourage them to apply for, and eventually some point they will get some funding for serving the people that other agency may not able to serve them well for that. So this application at the end, the summary section that I reread it, that they want to expand the service to the online. A little bit unclear about online service, but talking about the food and what else? Housing utility assistance. So
is it on Mentoring Plus, you mean? I'm sorry.
Mentoring Plus, yeah. The last page that I got the hard copy, the summary section talks about the COVID-19 and they want to expand the service. Implementing new services and programming to better meet the evolving needs of the families we serve. So they acknowledge that due to COVID-19, many services shift to a virtual format and requiring additional resources. And that involve with increased need of food and housing utility assistance. So I'm not a little bit unsure about how that connect between online service expansion and programming and then actually physical need, food and housing utility assistance. So
yeah, to my knowledge, they had not been doing the any direct assistance besides perhaps connecting to other community providers.
I will be right back. I just have to run out to lock our front door.
Sure, take your time.
yes.
Okay.
You know, this is perhaps it's worth having a longer conversation with them about some of their changes in their programming. The way the program had been running is much more succinct and and see, their unit still says they're per child, but they do reference some 18 to 21-year-olds, which is not per child. Maybe I can have, the suggestion would be, I mean, this is over, I mean, it's a small organization, but this request amount is relatively small, even still. If it's okay with you, Suki, perhaps Dylan and I can take the next year to really have a conversation with them and how they're currently operating and understanding how Campbell County is working with them to better understand that particular programming. Would that be okay with you?
I think so. I think that Mentoring Plus will benefit to having a little bit further connection to the county manner, so that even partner, I think that makes a little stronger. So yes, I will be, and as far as I know, it will be very beneficial for them to having some conversation with them. Appreciate that suggestion. Yes, I think that's a great plan.
Well, so we'll do that. We'll plan, Dylan and I will plan to try to meet with them early this summer and have some conversations with them well before the next applications due, so we get a better understanding of how they're operating, and if it seems to overcome some of our concerns that we've had.
Sure. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. I really do. It's helpful to know. So thank you. Moving down then, the New Day Ranch, this is the equine therapy, and I apologize I didn't put that in there. This is a very small organization, and she often has some difficulties completing the application, but this has been one that, as I mentioned before, we worked into this program after Catholic Charities pulled out. They do equine therapy with kids from the schools. It's not strictly mental health. It's not always just behavior based, but they work with specific groups of kids within the schools, and the schools have absolutely loved this program. We've gotten so many great reports back from it. It was difficult at first because they're located in Verona, so transporting the kids to the location has been a challenge, but the schools are throwing even more resources at this program next year so that they can get the kids down. Going back to R.A. Jones again, they've found ways to take their staff to this facility to do some building of skill sets and team building skills within the therapy program. It's a fantastic facility. It's really kind of fun to go out and see. They even have little petting. They do all kinds of different programming, but it's been a really well received project within, and they do use a national program. They are certified in this national program, and I'm forgetting it, and I don't see it listed here. I didn't highlight it, so I don't know off the top of my head. She didn't write it here, but I can find out that number too. So the request is to keep it flat for the number of the kids as we've done in the past. It's a 10-week program. Kids go out once a week. They've done a lot of renovations to the facility. At one point, the main barn was not heated and not climate controlled, and it is now climate controlled, which will be very nice because they still went out in the winter. They went out in the winter and they did it, but they learned how to work with the horses and understanding how to read the horses' emotional state and then how their own emotional state is being reflected back to them from the horses. It's really pretty impressive to see. So highly recommend the continuing funding for this project of $50,000. Collectively, if you think about it, between this one and Catholic Charities, we're still lower than what we were for Catholic Charities counseling services back in the day before they made their changes, which was always around $130,000, $140,000.
Well, and I know that last year New Day Their big fundraiser is the Burlington Spring Horse Show, and they canceled it last year. It's set to go in next weekend actually here.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but I know that they lost a large chunk of their private funding from that last year. So, and I do agree, it's a great program. I mean, I know it's kind of close to my heart, but that's even before I was hugely involved in horses, I thought it was a great facility and a great program in the school system.
She's attracted some significant donors to get that facility and that program running. So it's been,
Yes. Yep.
it's kind of neat to see as it keeps growing. She takes a very small salary, really almost
Yep.
nothing at all sometimes. So
Yep. Chelsea has volunteered or used to volunteer out there when she had a little more time than she does now.
oh, did she?
Yeah, she did. So yeah, it's a great program, and yes, she's got some really strong supporters for sure.
Are we comfortable with that number? Okay, next is Children's Advocacy Center. I'm going to go again until y'all say something. I'll just keep going on. The Advocacy Center, as you remember, they do the forensic interviewing for children who have been victims of often sexual abuse, severe physical abuse, or have witnessed a traumatic event. They have a fantastic facility at the on the same campus of the Florence St. E. I can't think of a more caring environment for an individual, a child to have to go into, and a family to have to go into after they've experienced these horrific events. So they do a fantastic job out there. The purpose behind the forensic interviewing is that besides having the two-way glass where you can have, it reduces the trauma on the child so that they only have to make the report of the disclosure. It minimizes the number of times they have to make the disclosure, so they don't have to tell the caseworker, and they don't have to tell the attorney, and they don't have to tell the law enforcement official. They don't have to tell everybody. They can sit behind a two-way mirror and see the trained forensic interviewer who knows how to work with children, share the information that they have, the disclosures that they have, which can reduce the trauma on the child. They also offer additional assistance to the kids and the families, just where they can get different other kind of referrals for treatment and other referrals as needed. The stuff that they do on a regular basis, the secondary trauma that they must experience as providers, it has to be, I don't know how you carry that on your heart, and that's a lot, but Vicki Henderson's been doing it for many, many, many years. She does it very, very well. Utilization, again, this has been one, hear it from all of our providers for child abuse services, because they haven't been in, and you probably have seen it in the news too, because kids weren't in these public settings where they had other eyes on them. Sometimes haven't been as many disclosures of abuse from somebody, so they haven't told a teacher hasn't seen that a child's been exhibiting signs of something being wrong. There's also, which I cannot for the life of me fully understand, the Department for Community-Based Services, the folks who work in child protective services and adult protective services have not been going out in the community due to COVID. I don't know how that's not a needed first response kind of an item, but they haven't been out as much. So that's reduced some of it. So I think that plays a little bit of an impact on some of their pieces. They have a high utilization rate though, so they've done okay regardless. Our recommendation right now it's just a small increase. I don't know that it's necessary to get to that full level, that the request at 76,000, but to do a small increase there for them at 62,000. We're happy with the work that they've done. It really does work well. Questions? Community Action Commission, this is another emergency assistance program. This is that straight cash going out into the community. They do, so it's utility and rent assistance. This is one organization that I'm watching to make sure that their capacity is okay. Because on top of getting a lot of CARES money in, they've gotten additional federal money called LIHEAP, Low Income Housing Energy Assistance Program funding. And then there's another set of funding that's coming in through the state called for utility assistance directed at it, which each Local jurisdiction can apply for up to $200,000 for their clients. So for Boone County, for the residents of Boone County alone, Boone County can apply, and then each of the 3 incorporated cities can apply. So that's $800,000 alone in assistance for Boone County. And they have the whole 8 counties that they could be able to do that for each of the counties and the cities if the need's there. So I'm a little worried about their capacity, but this has been a program that's been well used and well needed over the past year. And so again, this is one where it's a flat cash assistance that they look at. They pay directly to either the utility or the landlord, and then they take a 12% admin fee on top of it. So our recommendation is to meet that request at 23,000. The other piece, we kind of like those even numbers. I try not to do trying to get away from the 500s and that. So any questions about that? Okay, the next one then, the Education Council. So this one we're recommending a reduction. In conversations with folks at the Boone County Schools, they were considering pooling and not using this. She said that she thought that we were probably paying too much of it and that the schools needed more investment on their end to be a more useful tool. So, those kinds of things where they put their dollar in to make sure that they're actually paying attention and using the skill set. Additionally, they're probably going to change the system that they use. They will not potentially use the same resiliency poll next year. They're going to potentially look into a different system. Part of the problem is that when they get the results back, if they have so many kids that are showing as being critical need and they're the red level, they only have like 24 hours to respond to that child, or else they could be considered to be liable if anything were to happen. And she feels that they're not responding, but that they already have worked with those kids in other ways. And so it's just something coming back and saying, now you gotta go talk to them again within 24 hours because the results came back from the screening that they did. So in that way, it's burdensome on their staffing. So in looking at that, I looked at what Kenton County did. I think they were at $5,000 or $10,000. Campbell County is at 10,000. I thought taking it down to 15 would maybe be an easy way to back out from that. The other fun piece to this is that the new executive director there is the former Boone County Superintendent, Randy Poe. So it could be a little messy. But if the Boone County Schools is coming to us and saying, A, don't fund them as much as you have been because we as schools need to put it in to actually make it useful, and B, we're not going to use them after next year, I can't say no to Boone County Schools. They're really the reason that we're paying for it is that Boone County Schools is using it.
And the resiliency poll is, quite frankly, not good. How's that? Like it's not a good measure of what it needs to be a good measure of, at least what I've always known about it. So
do you want to cut that even further then?
No, I'm not saying you should cut it any further. I think with what you've said and the little bit that I know, I think you're right in cutting what you did and especially with the new director. I think that that's just a gray area for him to go from where he was to this, and then it's.
But I think he was such a proponent of it. I think he was such a proponent of it when he was at Boone County that's why it was adopted across the entire system.
Right.
But now they have a new superintendent, right? And so if they're not going to use it in the same way.
Yeah. And it needs to be updated. Like it's the way a lot of the children that they're asking those questions to, they really don't understand the questions even, or what the answers truly mean that they're giving. It's kind of fed to them, and those poor kids, they don't, if it's, it says something to the effect of, do you feel safe at school? Well, how is a kindergartner going to tell you, be able to answer that kind of a question? And mostly safe, kind of safe, really safe. That's just, yeah. So I think it's a good suggestion.
Well, as whereas my kindergartner told his teacher this past month that, oh, my mom should be getting out of surgery now. She was in surgery, a car accident. She said, what? So she asked my older son, who's in 4th grade, was your mom in a car? No. I mean, he's told her that
Right.
moving, I probably have to get others help for him. But yeah, it's helpful to know though, if there's, it seems like the school isn't happy with this tool at this point. They're need to use it again for next year, but they're not going to do it in the future. So,
And I'm not saying there shouldn't be something, but it needs to be something more realistic for the children that you're trying to get the answers out of. And then the way that it's administered, it's kind of overwhelming and scary, I think, to a lot of, especially the younger kids. And I think that's mostly what we were paying for.
yeah.
So
Okay, if you guys are okay with that, I'll jump down, but if any questions, please let me know. So the next piece is the health department. It's that adult dental services program. So this is the one that we remember as, and again, for Suki, we did this as an RFP. So rather than through our original application process several years ago, Boone, Kent, and Campbell got together and said, we see a need in our community for additional adult services, for dental services. And we had several responses, including the health department. And they've been running the program for the past few years, and it's been going very, very well. We look at this as both an employment type program. So while we have a lot of older adults who use it for things like dentures, and so it's kind of, some of that's a little bit of an aging piece maybe, kind of keeps them, it stabilizes them, maybe keeps them out of further institutional care. It also is an employment program, and we've gotten some amazing notes. They've done a great job of sharing some notes of the success stories from individuals who have received the services. They had perhaps a substance usage issue in their past, which damaged their teeth, which prevented their confidence. She had her teeth were fixed through the program, and she was able to go from working back in the kitchen to being in the front to being a hostess, and increasing her employment capability because of those things. So we think the program's going really well. There were lots of hiccups, as you can imagine, with the COVID piece, but it's picked up. It's a little bit underutilized still, I think, right, Dylan? But it can't, we think it's a slower use for Boone than for the other 2 counties. But so I think some of that will pick up a little bit as they go through. It's tricky billing with this because they use community dentists. So they'll they have somebody hired who kind of talks about the program. They refer them to a dentist to get the idea of what they need done. The dentist sends along a treatment plan, and then they approve or deny it. But so the billing takes a little bit sometimes to get it through what they have there. So our recommendation, we're very happy with it, is to continue at where it is. This would be something potentially as we move along that we maybe increase in the future, unless we can get Health Point to serve the population instead. So the Regional Mental Health Court is the next one on our list. This is the collaboration. It's Judge Thomas and Campbell County pulled this together. There are mental health courts for all 3 counties. Ours is primarily a misdemeanor docket. There's some felonies that are on there. They get funding from, interestingly, even though it's all courts are through the administrative office of the courts, the AOC doesn't actually pay any money into it. They get Department of Corrections money to operate the program, and then money from the counties. It had been our goal a long time ago that eventually AOC would take this over because it's a function of the courts, but they just haven't done that yet. So as part of that, our recommendation is to keep funding flat. I also, because of the way that the mental health court boards are set up, Judge Moore has a seat at the board, and I am his appointee, and I know that they have a small reserve, not a lot. I'm not concerned about it, but I think they're doing fine. So my recommendation is to keep it at the flat funding level. We're good? All right, people working cooperatively. This is, it's a small amount, $5,000. They basically use this to be able to say that they get a match from Boone County and they use it for other funding. So it's a relatively small amount. It's often difficult to get the billing from them. As far as when they submit the billing, it's kind of always all over the place. You can see that they're a little bit under now, but I'm sure by the end of the year, they'll wind up finding some stuff to bill us for. So I would recommend flat funding for this. The jail transportation, this is one that we do through the cab company. It's again a flat fee we pay out to the for transportation for the clients who are released from the jail and don't have any other transportation. It's worked well enough so far. It's not perfect, but it's the best that we've got right now since we don't have any public transit that goes into Burlington. They either, and then Suki, for your knowledge too, they either will take them, it's a $20 ride, so they'll either take them anywhere within 10 miles of Boone County Jail, or they take them to the tank depot on Mall Road, and they get a bus pass. Sometimes we've had people who have been arrested at CVG and they use it. I don't really understand, like they're passing through. I don't really understand. And we've had a couple ICE detainees because the jail gets a lot of ICE detainees. They have a federal contract. So we've had ICE detainees who have been released and then they get the transportation. I'm always kind of like, where do they go? It doesn't seem like a good option. I don't know where folks are going to go if you were originally from Chicago. I guess you can't stay at the jail, but that's been a flat fee. So we're okay with that particular piece of it. 1010. I joked with Dylan that the last couple of years that I've just been like, all right, what do y'all want to do?
How has 1010 gone in the past year?
So I don't know if you see their utilization rate on his documentation here, but they're only at like 15 and 23%. So my concern has been with this program that I don't feel like it's a very strong substance use treatment program. And I have, for Suki, for your knowledge, for your historical knowledge, I have recommended not funding it several times. The fiscal court has come back and said, they came to the fiscal court and the fiscal court said, no, we'll fund it. And then we funded it the last couple of years. This year, they got Medicaid certified. So they've begun billing Medicaid for their program. So I think that adds some legitimacy to the work. So I'll take it that it's maybe more on me, that I was maybe being a little overly harsh. I still don't particularly love all of it, but I'll take that. If any of you are familiar with Medicaid billing, it takes a long time sometimes to get going. So to their credit, they were very cognizant about not billing us until they were sure that they weren't going to get Medicaid reimbursement for their clients. And so they've really billed us what is the total? Dylan, do you mind looking up how much they've totally billed us so far this year? And so they really haven't billed us really anything at all because they've billed all this Medicaid billing. Do you have that number?
Yes, their total billing has been just over $1,000 for drug education and just under $1,000 for assessment.
So what that means, I don't think that they're not serving clients. I think they're getting reimbursed from Medicaid and so they're not using our funds for it.
So is it even worth our time to put funding aside for them?
My thought is that I don't want them to come to another fiscal court meeting.
Gotcha. Okay.
No.
We don't need that. I'm with you totally. I'm fine with what you got there. If they don't use it, then we'll just have extra money to be able to put towards somebody else later on.
And I think that if you hold a funding out for them, at least because it really is still really early on for them with this billing, and to see how it goes for them, that we might have a better sense in a year of where they're at. So the option's still there. We still look like we're supporting them. Frankly, I think that there might be more of a need for our funds than maybe for the testing assistance and the bus pass program, which was always a very small pot anyway. That's why we hadn't funded it. It was such a small amount. But that might be something that we look to consider supporting them with instead. If you're comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with what you got there. I mean, if you want to do that, then we let it go. And that way, A, you don't have the moment at the fiscal court meeting, and B, if they use it, fine. If they don't, then we can just fold it in later.
I think it's a good option. I think you wait a year and see how that goes for him.
Yeah.
It's a lot of waiting, but. So the next one is Welcome House. We're almost there, guys. I promise. I'm going to try to get you out at 5. Welcome House. They have the 4 programs here. The one that's new is the Family Promise, which you'll recall Family Promise, also known as Interfaith Hospitality Network from years past. They reached an agreement earlier this year to merge it into Welcome House, and that Welcome House would continue to operate it as a family shelter with the churches for 3 years.
Oh.
They had a lot of struggles. I mean,
That whole program has had a lot of struggles over the years.
it's been a tougher model to operate, I think, with using the churches and the volunteers. And I don't know that it's really a best practice when you think about it. I think it's utilizing the services and the availability of the community, but making a family move week to week to different locations, and every morning they have to get up and drive to Newport at 7 a.m. before, I gotta wonder if I don't think it's the best model.
I agree.
So I also, in our conversation, we had a conversation with them recently about other issues related to some of the other program that we've done. And I don't really get a sense that they've got a strong connection with the churches yet. I think the churches are going to be hesitant to do this, to host with the next year, as far as having COVID and things like that. They've had issues in the last several years. Family Promise has. My recommendation would not be to fund it at this time, to wait and see how it goes under this new transition, and then maybe consider it next year. I think there are other options, especially with there's a lot of COVID related funding in our community right now to do hotel sheltering because of COVID, where you could keep a family together. So where there aren't always necessarily places for 2-parent families to go, because of the COVID funding that's around right now, which isn't going to be permanent, but right now it's there. I think there are some more options to hotel folks that way. Otherwise, our recommendation is our full request for their shelter, for their women and children, and their payee services. They have a groundbreaking tomorrow. They're going to be building a new facility in Covington next to their current offices, and they'll be closing their Pike Street location, which will serve a much broader number of families, including 2-parent families. They'll have some stuff for individuals on one floor and then families on another, and different entrances and stuff. So it's really exciting for them. We're happy with the street outreach. We're still tweaking some things with that. We think it's a good program. It was really helpful for our winter sheltering program. I should tell you that gave a positive report for the first time ever. Boone County sheltered homeless individuals this year. And I think that we're going to have some really positive work. We're working on doing some really positive things around sheltering and ending homelessness in Boone County. And so I think we'll have more things coming in the future, but this outreach piece has been critical to that. It offers a lot of services to the folks who are unsheltered in our community, even sheltered, doubled up families. So we put it at 75. We felt like that was kind of keeping that flat, a little bit of an increase for their payee, and putting that request level for their emergency shelter for women. We felt like that was kind of the best avenue to go there. Thoughts about that?
I think that makes sense to me. I love Welcome House. I think they're great.
Yeah, I support that. Great program. And we needed this program too.
Yeah, we've been working closely with them. So it's been good. It's been good. It's hard when you're working really closely and have a good working relationship when you have issues with some billing and things like that. I don't like that part of it. I don't want to be the heavy all the time. I'm friendly with them. So, okay, we'll go with that particular piece. Our last one, Women's Crisis Center. You'll see that their requests are a lot smaller than that their allocation has been in the past year here. And so our recommendations here, I think this goes back to that right sizing. And I think as they've continued to finesse their numbers and understand what we're asking for them and calculating it out, I think that's what we're seeing here. So our recommendation is to do the flat allocations. The crisis counseling and crisis intervention is kind of their catch-all for working with mostly individuals in the community. This could be this person who goes out when they have a call at a hospital for a victim who's claiming domestic violence or raped, and working with those clients there, or they come bring them back into their meet with them in their excuse me, I can't even say hotel within their offices. And then they also have their hotline there. So I think this is a good value for what we're asking. Our portion would only be $5 an hour for what the counseling piece is there. It's really low. of the total cost. You know, their total cost is 151. So we're paying a very small portion of it. And then for their emergency shelter, this one is, again, sometimes it just depends on what their capacity is and what they have. We have no problems with their issues or what they're doing here. They've been good community partners too as we work through this homelessness issue. So that the Green Dot, this is the one we did not fund this past year, and I don't recommend funding it. They've had a lot of difficulty getting into the Boone County schools to do it effectively. And so then how they wind up billing us is a program that they run at Notre Dame. They have one Boone County resident there, but they've also billed us for things like the Women's March that happened. You know, so it's not, when I think what Green Dot is and how it was proposed, but how they're actually billing us for different things, it doesn't quite jive. The idea of spreading Green Dot and the bystander training and things like that, that makes sense. But they have these other kind of pieces that they try to bill us for, and it just doesn't, I don't think it resonates as well with it. So our recommendation again this year is to not fund that program.
I agree with that.
Okay. So if you're comfortable with that, as I said before, this total allocation would come to $1,002,000. It's $2,000 less than last year. If you feel so passionate, if you feel passionate about somebody and you want to increase an allocation, we can certainly do that. We usually never allocate above and beyond their request, but if there are certainly some that we haven't requested or we have not funded at the full request level. But I want to put that out there for you all. I'll give you just a few minutes to look at it. I know this is hard. So if you're comfortable with this, are we all comfortable with this number? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, I can't think of any that I felt like were, you know, something that we really needed to refocus where we were. I mean, I think our numbers feel solid this year for, you know, where we are. I'm okay with it. That's my 2 cents. Is I'm good with where it is.
Appreciate that. I'll stop this sharing here. Well, if you agree, Suki?
No, this is a great proposal, and I hope the program goes well. And I know the all of agencies need a lot of funding opportunities. And yeah, the thing is they ask for a minimum. We cannot fund more than what they ask for. So, well, yeah. So I look forward to more from the agency next term, but it looks really good to move forward. That's my observation, and that's my impression.
Well, and I think too, I think I think we've kind of right-sized with that. We never want our funds to supersede federal or state dollars or foundation or just general income dollars to the organization. We always want it to kind of be that last dollar in. So I always try to be cognizant of that. I don't want us to be funding with county dollars, something that we should be getting, our clients should be, our residents should be getting based on federal dollars. I don't ever want ours to supersede that. So I mean, we've been about this level. I think I said it before, I feel like we kind of right-sized a lot of these allocations. I don't know that we haven't had a lot of changes in them. There's still some maybe room. We might be, I think Life Learning Center is something we'll explore over the next year. We'll look into Mentoring Plus, certainly. I think maybe something we've talked about is transportation. Is that something we need to RFP out eventually? But this is where we've been at. So I really appreciate all your time. I know you've had to listen to me for 2 hours, and I'm so sorry. That's a lot. But we do appreciate your efforts, and we'll take this. So the plan is to take this to the fiscal court on June 8th for final approval.
Thank you to all the work both of you have done.
Yes, both of you. And yeah, it's a very impressive work. And thank you for preparing even start today meeting, 2 hours is very short. Okay. So thank you for everything, the efforts, and including the mailing this. And I acknowledge that it's a lot of work to provide.
Make our job easy.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. That's our goal. We want to make it as
We
easy
hear
as
it.
possible for you all, but it is ultimately your recommendation. So it's always our goal. All right, we can end the meeting. I'll go ahead and